It's not enough for a leader to promise wonderful things that are probably not going to happen, but people are also looking for leaders that don't lie and for leaders that are competent.
Dear friends, welcome to another edition of Forum 2000 Online Chat. Today I am joined by Moisés Naím, a renowned columnist, best-selling author of influential books like End of Power and Illicit. He's the chief international columnist at El País and La Repubblica. He's also a distinguished fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And this is just a few of the achievements. The list goes on and on. But with no further ado, I would actually like to give the floor to you to really kick off this conversation with, yes, your vision of what future is holding for us in terms of political leadership after this pandemic or during the pandemic. Will it ever end, actually?
Yeah, well, first, thank you very much for the invitation. Delighted to be chatting with you and with your audience. The future is going to be shaped by a lot of currents and tectonic changes in politics, economics, society, technology. There were a very important transformational trends before the pandemic. They are still with us and they will continue to be with us. Climate change is there and it continues to be a challenge. And many have mentioned, suggested that this the pandemic is just a dress rehearsal for some significant accidents and emergencies, climate emergencies. So that's still there. The pandemic may complicate things because it's going to drain resources. This pandemic is going to be very expensive for governments and for everyone. And that money could have gone to prepare, fortify the world for climate change and to develop alternatives that will prevent the problem from becoming even more acute. So that's one. The other is digitalization. The artificial intelligence is also with us, very in powerful way, is changing, it will be changing the nature of work, the nature of the labor markets, the relationships between employers and employees and consumers. And it's huge and it's here. Then you have an exacerbation of big power politics. We are seeing there was already an important rivalry between China and the United States, and that unfortunately, instead of calming down, has become more acute and more, I think, more worrisome. So these are just examples of the sort of things that are with us. And of course, now we have the pandemic, COVID-19, that is going to be with us for a while. The metaphor of a switch doesn't work. The notion that one day there will be a vaccine and then a kind of switch goes on that changes everything and brings us back to where we were before, I don't think is a very accurate or probable scenario.
Right. Thank you. You mentioned how resources that are now being invested into fighting COVID-19 pandemic could have been invested in other solutions, right? That should be in place for our future. But there are certain governments out there that we're seeing during this pandemic who are actually not very much interested either now or even in the future of investing into solutions-based approach to our livelihoods, to the future. What do you make of those countries, those leaderships? Because we're seeing quite a lot of them right now.
If there is a silver lining, and I don't even know if it is a silver lining or if it is going to be as significant as I hope it would be, is a return to respect and use and depend on science and on data and on people that have devoted their lives to study problems and are not just amateurs improvising responses to events that they don't know anything about. In the last decade or so, we have seen the rise and the ascent to power of populists, and deeply, clearly disdainful of science, of experts, of reliable data. So we have seen that. That's part of the populist recipe. You know, you as a populist are for the people and against the elites, and intellectuals and experts and doctors and scientists are denounced and ignored. And so we have still the remnants of that. Not, the United States is clearly an example, but there are others. And who knows? I begin to perceive a renewed appetite for competence. In leaders today, people not just want, it's not enough for a leader to promise wonderful things that are probably not going to happen, but people are also looking for leaders that don't lie and for leaders that are competent.
Right. Actually, it's great that you mentioned populists, because you wrote a column about the 3 Ps: the populism, polarization, and post-truth. And if we bring those 3 into our conversation now, and if you could elaborate a little bit more about these 3 very important Ps that make up more or less some of the debate right now that is taking place.
Yeah, I believe that those 3 Ps equal C or continuity in power. Those are tools, strategies, tactics to get and retain power. As you mentioned, P, populism, P, polarization, P, post-truth are part of the toolkit of leaders, of would-be leaders, and even autocrats, or mostly autocrats in today's world. Populism is, I have repeatedly said that populism is a problem, it's dangerous, but it's not our main problem. Our main problem is people that are bad leaders and bad governments that stay in power. So continuity in power, grabbing power and retaining it for long periods is far more dangerous than populism. A nation can survive 1 term of a bad populist government. It cannot survive 20 or more, as my own country, Venezuela, has shown. We could have survived 5 years of the presidency of Hugo Chavez. What the country could not survive, and in fact has collapsed, is after more than 20 years of continuity of a bad government. So the first is populism. Populism is not an ideology. Populism is a tactic used by those who want power or have power to retain it or to gain it. Then we have polarization. Polarization is normal. It has always existed. Differences in ideological postures, in interests, in economic perspectives, race, gender, regional, religion. There are all kinds of polarizing positions in a society, and that's normal. And in fact, is even welcome. That's democracy. You want all kinds of ideas, initiatives, interests to bubble up and then hopefully get resolved by society through democratic means. The problem now is that polarization has paralyzed the decision-making. Polarization has become global, has become acute, and has become polarizing. Paralyzing is what I want to say. It paralyzes governments. It makes it very hard. Countries become, especially democracies, become so polarized that they are incapable of making decisions. Very often they are even incapable of forming a government. We have seen it happening in Spain, in Italy, in England, in Israel, elsewhere. Wherever there's an election, the election doesn't solve the problem and just quantifies and certifies and confirms the deep division, the paralyzing division in a nation. So that's the polarization that now is crippling decision-making in governments around the world. And that polarization has been amplified by the post-truth world. Social media, the internet, and fake news, and manipulation, and all of that. So we live now in a world where we have a hard time figuring out what's true and what's not, what to believe, who to follow, what's the reality. And, you know, that's a way of fragmenting a society that makes it impossible, even a dialogue. If we don't agree on very basic facts, it's very difficult to have a dialogue, much less a political debate. So these three P's, populism, polarization, and post-truth, I think explain the politics in a lot of the world today. And the center of these three, they are at the service of acquiring and retaining power.
And I guess the next question is naturally, so what's next? What is next for the future of democracy in today's world? What do we expect? More polarized countries? How do we address polarization? How do we move forward? What is the future?
These are trends are, of course, deeply intertwined with the economy and the economic situation and the nature of economic relations in the world. Are we moving in a world that will continue to be increasingly interconnected and enmeshed and intertwined, or are we moving towards a world of more fragmented blocks that have limited, that are curtailing interactions with the rest of with other blocks? So that's one part. I believe that with the post-truth, we're going to have some innovations. Technology will help us. And also the public is going to react, and governments are going to react. It's a very fine line. It's a very hard to define equilibrium, because trying to contain fake news will obviously bring you directly into the debate about freedom of expression, censorship, propaganda, and all of that. But I believe that there is a global appetite to get sources and facts that are reliable. Plus, there will be technology, and there will be some technological options that people will have in order to fortify their defenses against lies and against manipulation. And then in terms of polarization, there are countries that are going to be so paralyzed that they're going to backslide. And there are other countries that are going to make horrible agreements, but inevitable. I wrote a column called Odious Coalitions, in which you will find societies in which people that hate each other, that have fought against each other forever, that have very different perspectives, find a way of creating a government, a coalition that can govern the country and make decisions. So it may be that in the future, countries and societies that are capable of reconciling the polarization that divides them with the need to govern that unites them can move forward. And others will be just chronically entangled in recriminations, conflicts, accusations, and fights.
So we're almost looking at different structured governments from what we're used to seeing in history, but also in present time. Everything is shifting, and so is the way the governments are going to look, democracies are going to look. Am I understanding you correctly?
Well, there's gonna be both. You're right. There's gonna be both profound shifts and transformations, and again, some driven by technology, some driven by all kinds of social forces and technological forces, economic, political, and so on. But we are going to see a lot of continuity also. And then it will depend. It's going to be case by case, country by country. But the general trends are going to be similar with us in terms of the ones that I outlined at the beginning. Climate change may change the very nature of society and politics. The same with digitalization, the same with the conflicts between big powers. All of those things can reconfigure the way we live.
Great. I actually don't have any more questions, and we are about to reach our 15-minute mark. Is there anything that you think we should mention in the last 5 minutes, or do you think we kind of touched all the important points?
I think we covered. I don't have anything special additionally to mention. So delighted with the conversation and very grateful for having been invited to talk to you.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been very interesting for me, and yeah, good luck with the conference.
Thank you. Have a very
Thank,
nice day, and thanks a lot again. Bye-bye.
thank you.